Merry Christmas, everyone. This is Barnes in the Belfry. I'm Barnes. This is the Belfry. We're looking at John chapter 1, verse 14 today. This is what it says. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. As you know, I've been doing a series on verses that we tend to get wrong. You're probably thinking, don't mess with this verse. How could we possibly get it wrong? I'm not saying we get this one wrong. What I am saying is that we don't get it quite right. And this is what I mean. John 1 was the very first chapter that I translated from Greek. My professor told me, hey, you're a newbie at Greek. The Greek in the book of John is fairly simple. It's a great place to start. Why don't you start there? So that's what I did. And when I got to verse 14, I remember coming across this word, skenao. It was a verb. I didn't know the verb skenao, but I did know the word from my vocabulary card, skenos, which meant a tent or a tabernacle. You can kind of hear skin in there. Skenos, skin, this is where we get the idea, like animal skins, tent. But what John was saying, obviously, was that the word became flesh and tabernacled among us. Translators, they use the word dwelt. John could have said dwelt, but he used the word tabernacled on purpose because the Jews would have had this understanding of what the tabernacle meant to them. The tabernacle was basically a mobile home for God. It was before they built the temple in that stationary location in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. They had this tabernacle that would move as sort of the heart of the camp. It would move with the people wherever they went. That's where it would go. And so to think about the incarnation of Jesus as a mobile home for God in the midst of his people makes a lot of sense. And it carries the idea beyond that God came and just dwelt with his people. I love how John in his first epistle basically said, hey, we saw him, we heard him, we touched him. It's much farther than, say, like a prophet who, he spoke for God. Thus saith the Lord, boom, and he speaks, and God is heard by people. But in this case, he is seen, not just in what he's doing, but his facial expressions. You can see in Jesus what he likes and doesn't like, what he chooses to talk about and what he doesn't choose to talk about, where he chooses to take action and where he doesn't choose to take action. I think to study the incarnation of Jesus is to get a sense of how he would feel if he was here today in our modern world, what we can learn about our political issues today or our theological issues today. If we study the incarnation, we can get a whole heck of a lot more insight into how God feels about things that we do today by just watching a lot of how Jesus responds and acts toward people. And I really think that during the Christmas season, we don't focus enough on that element of the incarnation, of just the mind-blowing reality of God taking on flesh and dwelling among us. Too often we emphasize just the fact that he came with this kind of like, well, he's here, guys, and kind of waiting for him to do the ministry stuff or the dying for our sins stuff or the raising from the dead stuff. We're kind of like thinking Easter's the important season, but Christmas is kind of like the setup for Easter. We get a lot of mileage out of the whole, like the big almighty creator God went into this tiny little lame manger. But it's not like he was living in some Narnia-like heaven place in a giant mansion in a really nice bed with a giant duvet and a feather pillow, and he's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go sleep in the hay, and there's gonna be animals, and it's gonna be stinky. That's us thinking about where we don't want to sleep and where we would like to live. God is coming from a spiritual existence into a material existence. That's that gap. It's nothing about a manger. You take a brand new baby today, you can put it in a hospital bed, or you put it in a manger, and that baby's not going to think any other thought. It's just accepting the world as it's coming to it. And I think sometimes we don't think of Jesus as a real, live, regular baby. Like in a way in a manger where it's like no crying he makes. He probably cried. He probably was spitting up. He was probably just like, the light, and he didn't understand what was going on, just like any other human baby. It wasn't like God is staring up at Mary thinking like, I created you, but somehow you created me, and we're going to write a song about it. He was as human as any other human. We know this theological formula. We talk about how he was fully man while being fully God. And I think sometimes that formula kind of kills our curiosity because it's like we can't really understand what we mean by fully human, fully God. And unbelievers, they love to mention how ridiculous it is for us to say that. They can get Hercules a lot better. Hercules was half God and half human. If he's doing a miraculous thing here, it's like, well, that's his divine half, and if he's doing a kind of a human thing here, well, that's his human half. We're trying to say that it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. At the same time, when we go through the stories and we try to explain to an unbeliever, we point to God's creative powers, water to wine, walking on water, healing the sick, raising the dead, and we're like, look, that's God. Only God could do those things. And then with the man elements, we're like, look, he's growing, he's learning, he's hungry in the desert, he gets frustrated with people, he has limited knowledge, he's afraid to die. That's very human. We're doing more like a Hercules thing with Jesus, but we're saying a different thing. We're saying, oh no, he's 100-100. Hercules is 50-50. Can we do that thing where he's sometimes man and sometimes God? We know that he's both at once, but how? Okay, I want to tackle that in our next video. But what I want to do today is just to open the door to the conversation of what the heck are we doing with God becoming flesh? We should be obsessed with the stories of Jesus. What did he say? What did he do? What was he like? And I don't just mean like, ooh, let's learn a theological lesson here. I mean, what's going on in that kid's head when he's 12 years old and in the temple and he's saying all these profound things? Like, did he have an advanced learning curve? Was God speaking to him as he was growing up? When did he know when he was the Messiah? When did he know when he was going to die? When did he not know? Did he ever not know? What did he feel like? How natural and supernatural was he as he was growing up? This is something I want to explore. This is something that I think unlocks a lot of doors and opens a lot of insight, not only to sort of our modern questions and issues, but also into what it means to be human. Not only what it means to be divine, but what it means to be human. So this is where we're going to go. But I just wanted today to open up the door and say, hey, yeah, sure, Joseph and Mary and Bethlehem and the angels and shepherds, and there was no room in the inn. We get all that. We know the story. But the incarnation should, at some level, blow our minds. And we should be at least mildly obsessed, if you can put those two words together, Jumbo Shrimp, about the incarnation. We should be reading, we should be studying, we should be thinking, we should be talking, and then we should read some more and talk some more and study some more. And that's what we're going to do. And I hope you join me, and let's get into this season. Okay, I'll talk to you later.